Without the photograph, all you have is a memory.
You're working with danger constantly.
Those were some of the most chilling sights.
The hard part was seeing my wife and having her say, "You're not really going, are you?"
There was really nothing heroic about what we did.
I was in the midst of this incredible devastation.
It just was something that you just couldn't believe your eyes.
It was like we were the only ones at Ground Zero documenting this for history.
Some of the things that we saw, you'll never forget.
My name is Tom Kenny.
My name is Edward Kilduff.
Alessandro Mainardi.
Tom Prynne.
Ramona Allegrini.
Alexandra Brett Millard.
Jerry Junta.
Richard Parker.
Father Matthew Moriali.
Daniel Cini.
Mark Foster.
And my name is Andrea Boer, and I photographed all these people and hundreds of others at Ground Zero. And I kept all of their names in a little green book. 10 years later, I want to go back and find them and hear the stories behind the images.
It is 7 o'clock in New York City, 2 days after the attack on America.
Another night of weary work for the hundreds of rescue workers who
West
are putting
Street
in
is lined with emergency vehicles from one end to the other, all the way from the Trade Center.
For the family and
They will
friends of
find
loved
people
ones,
trapped
still New
working
Yorkers certainly
by
reaching
hand
out
if
in
they
this
have
time of
to.
crisis, whether it is by donating blood.
It was the assignment that would change her life. FEMA photographer Andrea Boer, one of only 2 photographers granted exclusive access to Ground Zero, arrived there less than 48 hours after the towers had collapsed. Though she'd been covering disasters for more than a decade, nothing had prepared her for what she saw through her lens that morning.
The landscape at Ground Zero was one of the most unforgettable places I've ever been. When I started photographing, there was smoke and dust and just this unbelievable light shining through the facade. And I wanted to get closer, and there was this fire chief who was holding everyone back from going onto the pile. And the fire chief kind of looked at me and said, you know, don't worry, it's going to look like this for a long time. And as a photographer, you know, I knew that it wasn't going to look like that for a long time. Eventually, he let me in. And in fact, it never looked like that again. When I look at that photograph, it just reminds me of how hopeful we all were in the beginning. We just really believed that we were going to bring people out alive from Ground Zero.
It was after those hopeful and chaotic first days that the city restricted access to the site, but not for Andrea.
Myself and Michael Rieger, the other FEMA photographer, and the 2 videographers were the only ones that were granted the continued unlimited access to the site. I felt like it was such a tremendous honor to be able to continue photographing there. It also felt like this huge burden of responsibility. And it was one which I didn't take lightly.
But covering Ground Zero would have a lasting effect on Andrea and on many of the hundreds of people she would meet there.
I don't think there was anybody that came away from the World Trade Center without some type of post-traumatic stress. And we all dealt with it in different ways. The day after the first anniversary, 9/12/2002, I took all of my photographs, I took all of the magazines that my images had been published in, all of the newspapers, emails, everything, and I put them in a box. And I said, I'm putting 9/11 behind me. I'm moving on. Now, 10 years later, I realized even though I thought I had really moved beyond Ground Zero and 9/11, I really hadn't. And part of that was there were all these stories that I had never heard. I ended up going home and finding this little green book where I'd written down everybody's name that I had photographed at Ground Zero. And I started going through it. And all of a sudden, I started flipping through these pages and I felt haunted by all of these people's names and memories of them. It just became very important to me to find these people. Not all of them, but certain special people in that book. This guy right here, this is a fire chief. We'll probably have to circulate this photo to find him. In the Green Book, I have hundreds of names, but very few phone numbers. The book's a good starting place, but a lot of my notes are a little vague. Front, what does that say? Front nozzle? Group 3 firefighters night hose. There's Ramona. She's an iron worker. And this is Allie. She was 15 at the time. And this is Richie Parker. Finally, I settled on the people and pictures that meant the most to me and headed east to find them and hear their stories.
The first person I wanted to find was this firefighter on the nozzle named Tom Prynn.
Tom?
Yes, Andre. How are you?
I don't recognize you without a hose.
It's been 10 years. Never thought I'd see her again. Never thought I'd talk to her again, and never thought that I would ever see a photo that she took of me.
Do you remember writing your name in here?
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
No.
This is how we found you.
See my name in my handwriting. I didn't even remember that. When she says, yeah, you wrote in it. You wrote down your information in my book. No, I didn't.
There you go.
That's my handwriting. After she showed me the book, I'm thinking to myself, wow, now I recall that. I can't believe you have all that written down.
Yeah, I do.
The
That's
book
how,
itself belongs in a museum.
this is how we're finding everyone.
I don't think I'll ever forget the night I first saw Tom at Ground Zero.
It was the night of my mom's birthday. It was like 2 in the morning, and it just looked like a movie set. There were all of these mercury vapor lights set up, so it gave everything this really eerie cast. I remember thinking it was just one of the most extraordinary scenes I'd ever seen.
It looks like I'm posing for the camera, but I swear I'm not. What I was doing was turning around and trying to talk to Dave and Jim about whether or not I was hitting the right spots. But of course, the guys in the firehouse think, you know, I was definitely posing, and they're gonna give me crap for it, probably for the rest of my life. So, it was the 19th, middle of the night, probably around 2 a.m. Whoever the chief was at the time assigned us that hose line. That's a very important position. There were a lot of hot spots that were still creating problems. Underneath, there was still a lot of heat. So now you pull that rubble off, now it's supplied oxygen. We would still have fires erupting every day and night. And they would have hose lines in position, maybe one from the north and one from the south side, and you would hit that hot spot while those backhoes were working, while those guys were digging. And this went on for hours and hours, sometimes days. I remember having to swap out my boots because the bottom of your boots would either wear out or start to melt because of the heat coming up from below you.
The picture of Tom Prynn was one of the most requested FEMA photos from 9/11. But like most photographs, it only captured part of the story.
I don't know if you know this, it's the only time I've ever been on the nozzle.
No.
Yeah, I was assigned to the ladder 112, and we're a truck company, you know, so we don't do the hose part. We do all the tools and the ladders and all that stuff. I never caught a fire where I had the nozzle. So the only time I've ever held the nozzle other than the fire academy, was that day. And the picture that Andrea took. To this day, it's my only nozzle job, and that's it. The world knows about it.
Not everyone Andrea met at Ground Zero proved easy to find. Sometimes it required a stroke of good luck, as she got with a New York firefighter named Daniel Sini.
I was photographing half a mile away with a zoom lens at this unbelievable scene in front of me. You had all these firefighters with these ladders that were strung together with rope, and they were climbing up this mountain of debris. These people were like little ants on this mountain, and yet I wasn't close enough to get any of their names. As it turned out, a few years later, that photograph was in a magazine, and Danny tracked down my name and emailed me.
Danny? Yes.
Sure enough, I tracked him down.
And you have the magazine shot here?
Yes, I do. It's
you have it on the wall?
On the wall over
Can
here.
I see?
Sure.
Oh, man.
I am up there on the
There
top.
you are.
On September 11th, I had only about 4 years on the job, so I was considered still a junior guy. You get great training from the fire department, but nothing can prepare you for what happened that day. When I first got to Lower Manhattan, there was so much dust on the streets. There was just dust everywhere. And then when we finally made it up to where the World Trade Center was, it was just mountains of metal and smoke, and it just was something that you just couldn't believe your eyes. When you got there, you just went in, and wherever you could dig, you would dig, whether you had a shovel, a bucket, or just your bare hands. You just did whatever you could. In the photograph, we were on what was left of the South Tower. It was really tough to decipher how high you were because you were standing on top of 110 stories that had collapsed, but I would say we were approximately about 6 stories up, maybe more. When I saw that picture, I couldn't believe that I was standing in such a mountain of rubble. I was taken back about where I was.
When you guys got to the top here, where did you go?
Really, it just kept going. There was more of the collapsed tower that way, and just a lot of area to cover. It was a very large area. We were trying to set up a zip line to attach a Stokes basket so we can get anybody that was found in the South Tower, which was very high, to another place where they can be taken away. It was very hot and smoky over there because there were fires burning underneath us. And if you fell, you would go down pretty far, as you could see in the photo.
And when you see that picture of yourself, can you believe that you were actually there?
I know I was there, yes, but can I believe it? No, it was just a very, very unfortunate time. And I look back on it now, and it was a very sad time for everybody. But we had a job to do, and we did it. On the piles of rubble, there were a lot of voids and a lot of pieces of steel sticking out. Some of the spots you were able to go in, but you didn't know how far you would drop or if you would get stuck. And there was still fire burning underneath there. It was still very hot, very smoky. We knew that there were people trapped, and it was just very, very difficult to get to them because they were just buried underneath so much debris. And it made me feel very, very, very helpless. So one person was like a grain of sand in the grand scheme of things that was going on down there.
Sometimes the conditions at Ground Zero were so chaotic, Andrea was unable to write down the names of the people she encountered there.
I was just photographing around the site, and this chief obviously had gathered all these people together and was talking to them, and I was photographing him, and then the siren went off, and I think I took one more frame before we all took off running. I ended up circulating the photograph of him, and I circulated it through the fire department, and I was shocked to find out that he is now
Hi, Ed Kilduff. How are you?
chief of department, second only to the fire commissioner.
I've had this picture hanging up in my house, actually, for a good number of years. I can't remember where I first came across it, but I was like, whoa, look at this. You know, I was shocked, really, to see it. But I knew exactly where I was, knew exactly where that was, what day it was, within the hour. The photo was taken Thursday morning, the 13th. I was assigned to a quadrant at the Trade Center that was up by our Engine 10, Ladder 10 firehouse. I had this large group of firefighters who had come from all over the place to help out, and we were basically planning out our day.
When I took the picture of Chief Kilduff, a siren went off just at that moment. He's turning, and we're all looking past him.
Because we're wondering if another building is coming down.
The problem was that we were afraid things would shift, and that steel would shift and collapse somehow. Perhaps a building that might not be stable would come down. So the sirens were going off, the air horns were going off quite constantly in the first couple of days, and that was our heads up to back away and just be careful, stay away from any buildings that might be coming down on us.
And sometimes you try and get out of there fast,
Yes.
wherever you were.
Yeah. Really, a lot of the issue was we had so many people there, thousands of people. Everybody was looking to be part of the bucket brigade.
Bucket? Got a bucket?
Majority of firefighters in that picture are not FDNY. I don't know how they got here because the planes were not up, but they got in their cars, they drove to New York, they came marching in by the dozens, and we tried to accommodate everybody. Really, what my job was to find a job for all of these people here.
How did you do that?
And I said, why don't we start working on cleaning up Engine 10, Ladder 10 firehouse? 5 seconds later, everybody picked up, and if you remember, they all ran in like they were storming the Alamo almost. It was not highly organized, but it was happening. It was going on. The steel guys were doing their thing, the trade guys were doing theirs, the truckers were doing theirs, the heavy equipment was coming in. There was some organizational abilities going on, but everybody was sort of feeding off each other, trying to create the best opportunity to clear away debris, to start looking for people.
Those outside volunteers were critical to the operation because the New York Fire Department had lost 343 people on September 11th, including much of the department's top leadership.
Losing our leadership was a tremendous blow to us. Not only were they our bosses and our superiors, but many were our friends and mentors as well. So at the same time, the chiefs and the leaders of the department that were still with us, basically they just called everybody together and said, let's go, we got to get this done. The only heroes were the first responders, the police officers and firefighters, and the civilians in the building who tried to help people. They're the heroes of September 11th. The firefighters, the police officers that went up into the upper floors, tried to penetrate the building, they're the heroes. Nobody else is a hero. Everybody else is a helper. Everybody else went down there in honor of the heroes. They're the true heroes.
Photographing Ground Zero was the biggest assignment of Andrea Boer's life. But it almost didn't happen. On September 11, 2001, she was in a rundown hotel in southern Utah, preparing to spend the day photographing a herd of goats.
Hello? I got a call in the morning of 9/11 from a friend telling me to turn on the news. And as soon as I saw the news, and especially after I saw that second plane hit, I knew I'd be on my way. I didn't have any idea what I was going into or how I was going to get there.
We have no idea, of course, fire keeps growing, the smoke keeps billowing. Word just coming in to us, the FAA has closed off all airports across the country. No takeoffs, no landings.
The day after the attacks, the entire country was under an unprecedented civil aviation lockdown. Nothing taking off, nothing landing. But then, a miracle.
We actually had a company donate their private aircraft to bring some of our team members from Denver.
I just couldn't believe it. The owner of the New York Giants called FEMA and said, we have a jet in Denver. It's been grounded because the owner was here for the Monday Night Football game between the Giants and the Broncos. And if you can get us FAA clearance, we can fly, you know, a team, search dogs, blood, whatever is needed in New York. It might seem strange sending a team of photographers and videographers to Ground Zero, but it came down to the good leadership of Ed Conley, who was the Director of Public Affairs at FEMA, who recognized that this was a historic moment while it was happening.
Most of Andrea's earliest days at the World Trade Center were spent with the members of the Massachusetts Urban Search and Rescue Task Force, men like Tom Kenny, a firefighter from Cape Cod, who volunteered to go to New York.
Tom Kenny.
Hello, Andrea.
Hi.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good to see you.
Nice to see you, too.
On time.
We went there with the intent to rescue people, to take them out alive. When we first arrived there at the World Trade Center, the dust on the street was so thick, it was almost like the first New England snow. Our first snow of the year is very powdery, and you could almost blow it off of the ground. And that's just what it was like. It was like stepping in flour. Everything was shredded pretty much beyond recognition. There was dust, and there was glass, and there was metal. But after that, there was nothing. I had a good number of years in the business before I went to the World Trade Center. So I've seen things, but I had never seen nor could imagine that I would be involved in something like that. We've been getting all kinds of information about the number of people that were injured and buried in this collapse, and we were hearing these huge numbers.
Too many people missing for an accurate death count to begin.
Over 300 that we're looking for.
The death toll is growing.
A few thousand left in each building.
700 are still missing.
There's word now that 11,000 body bags have been ordered by the city. Rescuers are facing new challenges this week.
I think the first piece of equipment that we were asked for by a chief from New York City was our listening equipment. And so we moved that forward, but very quickly we realized that it wasn't going to be of much value because of the amount of noise that was operating on that site. And there was no way you could put a stop to the noise to listen for survivors. So then we went into void search, physical void search, where we would go into these spaces to look for a potential space where somebody could survive. There was really nothing heroic about what we did. We just did what we were asked to do.
I remember being out on the pile, not very far out, and kind of looking back. And I saw this firefighter and these two urban search and rescue workers, and they were standing there kind of under a flag. And I just watched them, and they were just so focused. I was at a distance from it. So I took the first shot, and then I zoomed in a little closer. It just had a very patriotic feel to me.
I didn't even know there was a camera there. I honestly didn't. I was focused on looking at the person that I was talking on the radio to get her dog to go in a certain place. But from where we were standing, it looked like a good spot where there was a potential to be survivors. In my career, this is probably the #1 photograph that's ever been taken of me. People would actually say, oh, you're the guy in the photo.
Right.
And do you remember which day this was?
That would have been the See, that was for sure the 13th. This was either the 13th or the 16th.
I mean, the days all ran together for me. I wasn't sure what day it was from the time we got there till the time I went home. That was taken between buildings 4 and 5. We were looking towards the 2 towers. They would have been out and to my right. And behind me, the black granite building, the Brooks Brothers Clothing, was actually on the 1st floor. And that's one of the places we were actually using as a temporary morgue. Anybody that we found, we were bringing over there, and they were going in the 1st floor there. We were actually standing on some rubble, but because that whole area caved in from the weight of the towers falling on it, makes it look like we're standing way up high, but the reality is we're only a few feet higher than the street. The black building actually was a source of many evacuations of the site. Buildings that tall, the windows were broken some 30 stories up. And what would happen would be the wind would blow. And if the wind blew and hit the drapes or the curtains, they would push the glass out of the windowsill, the broken glass, and then the glass was falling, some 30 stories. And big pieces of glass falling 30 stories. When they start hitting things like parked cars and demolished trucks, they make an awful lot of noise, and the next thing you know, somebody yells, the building is falling, and then everybody's told to evacuate. Evacuate meant run for your life. And so you would have hundreds of people running in whatever direction. So if you were the first one to run, you were okay because everybody would follow you. If you weren't the first one, you could be in trouble pretty fast. And it was much more dangerous for us to actually try and get out of that space and then race up the rubble pile and make it to the street in time for somebody to say, oh, don't worry about it, it was just broken glass.
You can't really tell how far down that is. I mean, that was like a 30-foot drop right there.
Yep, and then it dropped off just to the left of this. Right. It dropped off drastically, and then a little bit further out, this is an area we referred to as the pit, which was probably the deepest part of the whole thing, and I was outside of that space, and I kind of took a look around, and it was like I was the only one there. Because we were down deep enough so that you couldn't see anybody else, and although there were thousands of people there, from my vantage point, all I could see was just completely surrounded by this big pile of rubble and no one else in the whole place. There were places that still had free fires burning. There was the smoke, and there was the carbon monoxide in the air, and there was glass, and there was dust. So all the things that you had to worry about, if you moved something, there was a potential that something else could move. One of our engineers that was with us would evaluate an area before we went into it. And he kind of had this mantra that we would ask him, is it okay to go in there? And he would say, no, but go quickly. A day later, we located a woman who was laying on the rubble between building 4 and 5, kind of in a small sunken area. And to me, it almost looked like she just laid down there. She was dressed businesslike. Her hair wasn't messed up. She wasn't physically destroyed like some of the people that we saw there were. It was almost as if she just laid down on this pile and the dust cloud came and covered her, and that was the end of it. She looked like a China doll. We went there with a specific mission, and that was to rescue people and save them. That's what we trained for. That's what firefighters do. That's what police officers do. And so that was our intent. And probably when that photo was taken, we were still in that mode. I mean, you can tell. I'm directing a dog. I'm not going to direct a dog where there is nothing for the dog to find. It just doesn't happen. So I know by where I was when that picture was taken what I was doing. And it was at a time when we were still hopeful that we would get somebody out of there alive. I think that probably by the completion of our first day tour, that we pretty much knew it was over. It's not to say that we weren't hopeful. We were hopeful the entire time. There's always a possibility of a miracle. But there were no miracles there for us.
Thousands of people toiled at Ground Zero. The work was repetitive. the uniforms similar. But photographer Andrea Boer saw everyone as individuals, each of them memorable in their own way.
There were so many characters at the site. Jerry Gento was the operations chief for Massachusetts Task Force 1.
Jerry seemed to be everywhere. The way I always found Jerry was by his helmet. He had this zebra-striped helmet, and you could look around and you could find Jerry, and it kind of made you smile. Jerry?
Andrea, how you been?
How you doing?
Long time no see.
Good to see you.
It's great to see you.
Do you still have that zebra hard hat?
Yes, I do. I don't have it with me. I have a leather helmet at the firehouse, but I still have it. We had to buy our own, so I said,
Right.
well, I bought it, and I wanted to
Right.
make it distinguishable, so
Well,
I just...
it is.
I got some feedback from some of the people as it not being too professional. You're representing the federal government. You really shouldn't do that. And I said, well, I guess it's my helmet, and I'll do what I want to with my helmet. You know, and it's funny, down at the World Trade Center, when people were looking for me, that's how people said, just go find the zebra helmet, and you'll be able to grab them.
I know.
So it worked out well.
I know.
It
When I
did.
go through the photos, that's how I find you. I'm like, there's Jerry out in the
Right.
middle. There's Jerry.
When I arrived there on September 12th in the morning, what I kind of related to is the first time you go to the Grand Canyon, see the Grand Canyon, it's walking to the edge and you're just in awe of the beauty that God's created. And this was kind of the other side of the coin. You're in awe of the devastation that man has created through terrorism. Our forward base of operations was right in the plaza on Church Street, and looking ahead, we were looking directly at the globe. So the globe being the hub of a clock, we were at 6 o'clock where we stood. And we sectioned off, perimetered the area like slices of pie, working around from 6 o'clock where we were closest to Church Street, around 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, in that direction, counterclockwise, because there was so much smoke, as you can see in the photo, to the left. And if you notice, even in that picture to the left of me is a group of people that are lined up, and we formed like a conga line of people to pass tools in and out. It's a much easier way over a rubble pile to pass things along as it would be for one person to carry something in and out. That's where a lot of time is lost. It was definitely a blessing that I was one of the chosen ones to go down there, because I was able to work every day, work until I could no longer work anymore. I was just so tired. There's always hope. And we were all hoping that we were going to find not one person, but many people that's what we cling to, and that's what we had to keep in our hearts, that there was hope that we would find someone. But as we know, a lot of them didn't escape.
In talking with some of the people that I photographed, I found that it was really hard for some of them to look at the photographs again. For them, it brings up memories, and a lot of those memories are really tough memories.
Everybody deals with it in their own way. I think some people just choose not to talk about it too much. But the pictures are really hard to look at it at a lot of times. It's they bring back a lot of emotion. A lot of people lost so much.
Ground Zero was a world inhabited by more than just firefighters. Andrea spent time with iron workers, carpenters, truck drivers, police, and keeping watch over it all, the military.
Basically, what we were asked is to support any of the search rescue activities with the fire department, the police department, and anybody else. When anybody found anything, planes, parts, material, remains, human remains, or anything, they would bring it to us. And then our job was to basically bring any type of human remains to the fire department, and then any type of plane remains or anything else to the containers that the FBI anti-terrorist unit put out there for collection points. And of course, watch and look for the black box of the planes, and also provide security. And that's exactly where then I met Andrea.
Alessandro had left the National Guard a couple years after 9/11, but I managed to find him living in Pennsylvania.
Andrea?
Alessandro.
Oh my gosh.
Hi. Good to see you.
Same. I'm shocked. I am just,
I know.
Like I said, it's been 10 years. Yeah. I've been thinking often of you and, all this that I met down there. And, I had no idea how to get hold of you. And I'm glad you did. When I decided to come into this country to complete my studies, after I graduated, I just felt that I had to give something back to a country that provided, tremendous opportunities to me and continues to provide great opportunities to me. Personally, one way that I knew how to give back to a country that helped me a lot was to serve in the military. I still remember we went around a bunch of it, you were taking a bunch of pictures and everything. Of course, the one that kind of was a bit impressed is when we had that kind of the wind turned around.
Yeah, I remember.
And we had that smell.
Right.
I think it's the 18th of September. I was escorting Andrea around part of the perimeter that is literally between building 4 and 5, and the wind changes a bit. The reason I remember about the specific picture is because as the wind changed, it brought to my attention the smell of basically potential burned body. And that's something that I, unfortunately, had experienced before. That's why I stopped. And I informed Andrea, and then we got hold of a fireman. And I believe that each of us said his or her own prayer to whomever this person might have been. And it was very clear from the very beginning that it was being treated as sacred ground. Everybody was very good in treating that area with respect and being very professional and doing their job.
What did you think when you got the photos I sent you? Was it hard for you to look at them?
I was very happy to have them as a testimony of what happened down there. And then I looked at it for a while, and then I put them away. So till this day, I haven't looked at those pictures again. I know where they are, in a safe place, but I haven't shown it to anybody else, even my kids. My youngest daughter, who was born in 2000, doesn't know that was down there. Perhaps that's the wrong thing to do, but that was my initial reaction at the time.
Of all the people FEMA photographer Andrea Boer met at Ground Zero, some of the most unforgettable were the women who were doing some of the most difficult jobs imaginable.
When I saw Ramona at the site, I just thought, wow, look at this woman. You didn't see many women around Ground Zero, especially on the pile. I just thought it was so amazing. She was just in there with all of these men, and she was so strong and confident. The photograph of Ramona just reminds me of how the early response was, that not going to give up attitude that everybody had. I remembered that she lived somewhere in Brooklyn, and there are a lot of Diaz's in Brooklyn. We went through all of them and didn't find her. Fortunately, she kept Diaz as part of her married name.
Ramona?
Yeah. Because we later found her out in rural upstate New York.
I thought you would have been the easiest person to find because you had your number written on your arm, your phone number.
Wow, that's my waist? You sure that's me? Wow, that's a great picture.
Do you know how many Diaz's there are in Brooklyn?
Everybody in Brooklyn is Diaz or Muhammad.
I know. I know that, trust me.
Ramona looked so fearless in that photograph, but in reality, she told me that when that first plane hit, she fled the city. Later, the company that she worked for asked her to come back to the city and help with the response.
I was like, come back? Come back? You know, like back over there?
Right.
And he was like, yeah. So I had to put my little Brave cape on, got in my car, kissed my daughter. And I was like, okay, here we go. And as I was driving back, you don't hear anything, silence. Like no cars, no anything. That's all the sound you heard. You didn't hear anything. And no movement. You know how the city is. We're moving. There was no movement. Everything was just still. And everyone that was around still didn't know what to do with the situation. To tell you the truth, I didn't catch until I really got to Ground Zero and saw what I saw. I saw body parts and firefighters, grown men crying and not knowing what they had to do. So let's just started burning down rebar, burning down beams, anything, because I could use the tools. So anything that I could do and anything that I could help, even with the buckets, filling them up. I was there for 14 days straight and I slept there. Didn't go home. Wow, look at this.
Ramona had never seen the photographs that I took of her at Ground Zero, but as it turns out, she'd kept her own mementos.
I was burning some bolts because they wanted to take some beams apart. And as I was cutting, I was kind of throwing them down, and I was told, hey, we're down here. So I started putting them in my pouch. So when I cleaned out my tool belt, I literally found bolts that I cut off and so on. So I wanted to do something at them, but I don't know yet.
Wow. Can you take it out?
Well, sure. Yeah.
The size of that thing.
It's heavy. You wanna...
Oh, yeah.
Whoa. Yeah, right?
Oh, no wonder your arms look like that.
My father came as an immigrant to the United States of America with nothing in his pocket, and he worked very hard. And his job was to weld, fix, and he was very good with his hands. He welded in the docks, and he welded many places, and one of the places that he did do work and welding was at the World Trade Center. Believe it or not, one of the reasons why I keep the bolts, you never know if he touched it, too. And I touched it, so I keep it there. You never know. $260, yeah, that's my old phone number. That's how you couldn't find
Trust me, I know. I've tried every
yeah, that access
combination.
To put out Social Security, I wouldn't do that. So I put my phone number on it.
In case you got hurt?
Yeah. You will cut the most small little piece, and this whole entire collapse. You will take out this huge 30-foot by whatever beam, and nothing will move. So people were getting hurt. I got hurt. I got, you know, my lip got busted a little, and I got cut. So what they asked you was to put your name and your number. They asked us to put it on a leg, on an arm, and our back. If anything happened, they will be able to distinguish and call your family. Like this company, they came with equipment that they could take vibration off the ground to see if there was anything underneath.
Right.
And there was a moment that they told everybody as we were cleaning up to shut up.
I was there.
Oh, you were there? That
Yeah.
we were hearing the people underneath, on the ground?
And the whole pile went silent?
I still think about that. We were hearing the voices and the mic.
And they put the audio detector down there.
Yeah,
And they
remember?
said, if you can hear me, you know,
Say-
tap on a pipe.
And they did.
Yeah.
And we were like,
And everyone went quiet. I mean, that was amazing.
so that made you like, oh my God, we could save someone, so do what you have to do. So I would burn steel, cut steel, whatever it had to do. But after a while, we didn't hear him bang anymore.
Despite the tragedies experienced every day at Ground Zero, there was no place anyone wanted to be more. Firefighter Tom Prynn, in particular, refused to go home until the last body was recovered.
You know, when you would walk away from the site and you were forced to feel things that I didn't want to feel. And I'll be honest with you, if it wasn't for the work, I don't think I could have kept myself sane. You would do these 12-hour tours and then go home, come back for 12 hours, 12 on, 12 off, 12 on, 12 off. Some days we didn't feel like we were doing anything. You did what you did, It was the only way we stayed sane. You had to keep your hands busy. But I just wanted to help. And I just wanted to do what everybody else was doing. I just remember I wanted to make a difference. And I wanted to bring some of the guys home that I knew.
In talking with Tom, it occurred to me that while it's difficult for a lot of us to put Ground Zero behind us, it's even more of a struggle for those who were actually there on the morning of 9/11 to put it behind them.
The morning of September 11th, I arrived down at the Trade Center with the guys that I was working with. And obviously there were a lot of guys that I saw that morning, a lot of guys that I heard on the radio, a lot of things that went on. Can we stop for a second? I just don't know if I want to talk about that moment, that morning. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm not comfortable sharing, for me anyway, only because a lot of the guys that I worked with that morning didn't make it out. And I don't want to take away from their story, because theirs is the story we should be telling today and every day after.
The son of a New York City fireman, Tom Prynn couldn't even count all the friends that he lost on September 11th. But the one that hit him hardest was a man he'd known most of his life, Captain Patrick Brown.
Patty Brown, captain of Ladder 3. He was a fireman again, went through the ranks with my father, and then when I came on, was one of those guys that put his hand out, congratulated me, always made himself available to me for advice or whether I was going through hard times. This day in December, I remember we were working. It was a nice day out, the sun was out. We'd come across this section and we had found what looked like was a bunker coat. So we knew we obviously had a fireman. Every fireman has their name in their coat. I could never imagine this is why we were told to put our names in our coat. But they found his name in his coat. We knew nobody else was wearing Patty Brown's coat, That would be, those are shoes you don't ever want to fill. So I don't think anybody had the courage to even try to put on Patty Brown's coat. We dressed him up with the American flag. We got into formation. The members of his company brought him out of that pile, brought him home to his brother, to his family. I remember as soon as we broke formation, I asked permission to take 5 minutes. Stepped away from the pile and I was able to call my dad. And tell him the good news. I still have a problem saying it. It was a good day. Because we were able to bring Patty home.
By the time Patrick Brown's body was found, the rescue operation had long since ended. There was no official announcement, but it was clear that the efforts were being scaled back. For men like Tom Prynne, it was too soon.
When they did that, to me, it was like a little bit was giving up on hope. And we weren't ready to give up on that.
No.
But I just remember the guys that I was working with and you know, most of the firemen that I knew, we didn't accept that. If I could tell that wife or that daughter or son that, you know, hey, maybe daddy's coming home, you know, who are you to tell me that I'm gonna give up on that? You know? So I guess it did change the mentality of it, but well, for me, it was anger and resentment. And that's a poison for me. That wasn't fair. You know, we still had a job to get done. We still had brothers down there. We still had people that hadn't been brought home yet. I mean, there's over 1,000 people that are still unidentified. You know, those people don't have closure. And that sucks. You know, and to this day, that's a job that I failed. I remember going home, you know, did I maybe have a couple too many beers some nights? Yeah, you know. Was I isolating? Did I shut out my family sometimes? Yes. You know, the work was the healthy thing that I did at that time in my life. You know, and you're the only proof of that.
No, I'm not the only proof.
You're the documented proof. You know, and again, I have to thank you. I'm very proud, you know, and in a good way. I'm humbled today by you in that picture.
It meant so much to me when Tom Prynne thanked me for the photograph. I mean, I was so touched by that. And I guess it's because I've always believed so much in the importance of documenting the historic moment. And the fact that he thanked me, just, it sort of validated everything for me.
The handling of the dead at the site was a very serious matter, and everybody treated it as such. There were clergy and priests at the site as well. I was on Chambers Street, and I saw this Franciscan friar walking down in his long brown robe with the hood and the rope tie around his waist, and I thought, how odd is this? I approached him and started talking to him, and he told me that the first 2 days, all he did was cry.
I just felt the urge that I wanted to be at the site. You know, I was annoyed at myself that I wasn't able to function or do anything or just sit there and look at it, you know, from 5 miles away. In New York City, most of your firemen and policemen are Roman Catholics, at least a majority of them. So I went over to the 50th precinct, the police station, and asked them if I could go down with them.
Father Moriali has changed parishes multiple times, but we finally found him in a parish in Connecticut.
Father Moriali?
Hi, Andrea.
Hi. Hello.
Good to see you again.
You too.
How are you? After 10 years, I'm in shock that you remember me.
I do. You're a hard man to forget. I brought you some photographs. So there you are in your hard hat.
That's right. That's right.
A brown robe and a hard hat.
Well, that was an order. They said you have to wear
we all had them on.
to do that.
And you weren't wearing those sandals you have on, right?
No, and then I was told after the first or second day it was, they said, Father, you have to come in with boots if you're going to come at all. So I had the hard hat and the boots.
Yeah, you definitely kind of stood out.
Yes, but they didn't say anything about my Franciscan robe, and I kept that. Once I was present at Ground Zero, I just went my own way. You know, I just went where I thought I might have been needed. My first encounter was there were 6 pallbearers, they were firemen, and they had a body bag, and they asked me to anoint. We have a vial of holy oils, and we place the oils on our thumb, and we bless the forehead and the palms of the hands. They weren't allowed to open the body bag for me. They wouldn't. And so I just went through the procedure and anointed the head of the person through the body bag. I began the prayers, and I immediately began to cry. I became very emotional, and I attempted this about 3 times before I had myself in control. And in doing so, I completed the prayers, and after that, these poor 6 pallbearers, who were very rugged big men, I had them crying also. And that was the first couple of minutes that I was there. I didn't anoint at all times complete bodies. I went one place where it was like a cave. I had to bend down and go in, and there was just a hand sticking out of the ground. Another time, there was a decapitated body, or there were body parts. Christmas Eve, I went back, and there were elderly men who were raking up what they presumed was the incinerated, cremated bones. And we just gathered together in a circle, and we said prayers, holding each other's hands. That was it's very emotional.
Have you been back down to Ground Zero recently?
I was there last September the 11th. It's still a hurtful situation. It's still a hurtful memory.
Mm-hmm.
The first couple of weeks, it was hard. It was difficult. But afterwards, it was a bit inspiring because I saw so many people present. It was like God calling people to help. And it was like almost a holy presence. It was something that, to me, was disastrous, and it became something very kind. So it wasn't faith-shattering, it was faith-restoring.
In the weeks after September 11th, any hope of finding survivors vanished, and Ground Zero turned into a construction site. But it was also the final resting place for 2,753 people.
There was a memorial service at Ground Zero. I didn't feel comfortable photographing it, and so I kind of wandered around the backside of the site. The site was constantly changing. One day you would go somewhere and photograph something, and the next day you'd return, and it would look completely different. People had written messages in that fine concrete powder that covered everything, including the windows. I photographed these one day and decided to go back the next day and photograph more. And when I went back, somebody had washed the windows, and it was like a piece of history had been washed away. And it was just like that every day at the site, constantly changing. As I was walking around, I saw a fire chief escorting 2 women and a young girl. It was sort of unusual because you never saw civilians at the site. And then the young girl said to me, "Do you mind taking a picture of me by myself?"
I think it was in October, early October. There was some ceremony or something for the families, some sort of vigil or something at Ground Zero. You know, it was one of those things that I did because my mom told me to, and I knew that she needed me with her, but it was sort of very uncomfortable to me. You can tell how thrilled I am to be there by the expression on my face.
Right when I was taking the picture, she pulled out this photograph of her stepfather, who'd been the head of Port Authority. It was only later that I realized that there was a rainbow behind her.
Everything just came together in the photograph.
It was the program for his memorial service, which was probably only a day or two prior. Part of me looks at it and, I feel almost ashamed to admit that, there's some vanity, that's like, oh my goodness, I should have combed my hair, and I was such an awkward, chubby teenager. I was 15 and this was my first experience with grief or loss. I think I may have just been too young or too distracted or maybe I had just numbed myself to not feel it. Like I was sort of waiting for this emotional wave of something, but it never really came.
This has always been a photograph that was kind of special to me, and I guess I just assumed that she really liked it as well, but I came to find out that I was wrong.
All respect to Andrea, I don't really care for it because it is a very sentimental looking photograph. It's a very postcard-like photograph. I just remember around 9/11 being confused, being very confused about like, why would this happen? When are people gonna start moving on? When are the trains gonna start running? When are things gonna go back to normal? I wasn't as hurt and destitute, I think, as that photograph portrays. To me, I look at that photograph and I look sad, I look crushed. I don't look confused. It's not necessarily true to what I was feeling.
I was kind of surprised by her reaction, but I wasn't really bothered by it. She made a really important point that this image freezes her in time, and that wasn't how she really felt. Clearly, I didn't put the picture of her stepfather in her hand, nor did I put the rainbow. That's just what I saw at the moment.
For an image of 9/11 in my head, that's not what I see. I see a giant gaping hole that doesn't look very pretty without any rainbows. Those are my poignant images of 9/11. You know what I mean?
The Massachusetts Task Force was sort of like my family at Ground Zero, and Mark Foster in particular was the one that really brought me in and made me feel kind of like a part of the team.
Mark.
Hey.
How are you doing? Hey, bud.
Give me the big hug.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. Okay, Jack. She's a friendly.
You're gonna come with us. Search dog?
No.
No.
A pet. The Trade Center was our first big mission. It was the first significant mission. It was the first mission that everybody went to. It was the first mission that was a bolt out of the blue that we went to with no preparation. That's kind of the last of the World Trade Center vehicles. When the orders came down to go to New York City, the trucks were old, none of the paint matched.
Was this the one you took to the World Trade Center? No
It
wonder
might
you had
be.
to drive 50 miles an hour.
I think we lost a muffler on one of the big trucks in New York City while we were down there. Matter of fact, the only truck that was a new truck was we rented a camper from a local recreational vehicle rental place. They didn't have AM, FM radio, so guys had no idea what was happening. Everybody's listening to the radio. Our guys are just sitting driving down.
It was really amazing to see how much the task force has grown. They have this rubble pile for training, and when we were walking around it, it kind of brought a flashback to when I photographed him at Ground Zero. But of course, the conditions there were very different.
In that photo, we're on the plaza. Behind where I stood was a famous sphere or ball that was in the center of the plaza. If I were to take 10 steps backwards, I would fall into the abyss of the Trade Center. All of the material that was comprising, other than the steel in the World Trade Center, got pulverized and turned into a dust. And that dust floated around until the very heavy rain that fell. The good part of that was that it kind of cleaned most of the dust out of the air. However, there were some small fires that burned for months below in the Trade Center. And most of the smoke you see is from some of the fires that still had not been extinguished several days into the fire. If you look at the picture that next to my head is a tri-beam that comes up, that it come off probably fairly high up on the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center was a very unusual method of construction for the time. If you notice, if you look at the rubble, the beams occur in clumps of 3, and that's the way the World Trade Center was built. The tri-beams were probably the only thing in the World Trade Center that looked like they looked before the collapse.
So this is the beam, huh? Wow.
Yeah, this is 3 floors of the World Trade Center. Last year, somebody sent to me an article from one of the Firehouse magazines that said the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey was considering releasing pieces of steels to worthy agencies that would display them in a manner that was befitting the 9/11 tragedy. It actually has a serial number. See?
Oh, yeah.
This is called impact steel, by the way, meaning it was on the floor that the plane flew through, and the plane hit part of the steel. We flew down to New York City. We loaded the beam on the truck, covered it with American flag, and drove it back to our task force here in Beverly.
This is amazing.
See, there's a hole in the middle?
Yeah.
That's a window on the 93rd floor. And then that half up there is a window on the 94th floor, and that's a window on the 92nd floor. We kind of live this stuff here. I mean, every morning I park my car in front of the piece of metal from the 94th floor of the World Trade Center, and you go inside, and the walls are not covered, but there are quite a few mementos on the wall. This end is where the plane hit.
Amazing.
You know, there isn't a day that goes by that I watch a plane fly like that. See overhead? And you just, it's kind of spooky. Sometimes you look up and you say, you know, it's the way they looked just before they hit the Trade Center. I don't say it's a haunting, I guess it's somewhat of a reminder that, yeah, that's kind of what people saw in New York City, I guess, on 9/11. I lost friends in the World Trade Center. How it affects me, I'm not too sure. What do the pictures on the wall mean? I'm not too sure. We all just assume everybody thinks the same, but we don't. Everybody has their own story, and they're not all happy stories.
The landscape at Ground Zero was one of the most unforgettable places I've ever been. And seeing all these people made me realize that it wasn't just the people I wanted to see, it was Ground Zero. So when I called Richie Parker from Massachusetts Task Force 1, I asked him if we could meet there.
It was really important. You know, I couldn't figure out exactly why, but it was really important for me to see Richie. I felt like in some way he was the key to something. And it wasn't until I started going back through the photographs that I started to understand. And I think it was because Richie was like a bridge to Ground Zero. At Ground Zero, especially on the pile, you just couldn't be a freelancer. You couldn't be out there on your own. You had to be associated with a search team or the police department or the firefighters. And Richie and the Massachusetts Task Force 1 were sort of my family.
Hello, Andrea. How are you?
Richie! What took you so long?
To walk down the path?
For you forever.
10 years.
A couple of days after the towers collapsed, Richie was assigned to go with me as I walked the perimeter for the first time.
That whole scene, the whole 16 acres was unbelievable. you can't be an individual at a scene like that. You have to be part of a something, and so I helped give her that access.
10 years later, we wanted to take that walk again.
I got to get a picture of you 10 years later.
The plan was to retrace our steps, but it turned out to not be that easy.
Okay, now look right here. Is this... Okay, was that where the sphere was, right out in this area?
I think we're a little bit more in front of the Millennium Hotel here.
Okay. Where was your Massachusetts tent? I have a
Right
shot
here.
of that. It was right here by the...
I think probably just on the other side of this green wall. You didn't have to go but like 100 feet and be surprised almost. It was, you know, you took that first corner and there was like a fast food restaurant there, you know, NYPD, you know, headquarters.
Hey, Richard, you remember that was like the police headquarters, that Burger King, you remember that?
You took a picture, I was standing right there. When you transform a fast food restaurant into a police headquarters, it shows that the situation's pretty drastic, right?
Back in 2001, when we were walking around the site, Richie and I were coming around the northwest corner of the pile, and I just all of a sudden kind of looked around us, and it was like we were out there all by ourselves, you know? It was just like this moonscape. At the time, I didn't even notice, but there was like this ambulance buried. It's just kind of one of those chilling details that I saw later.
We had thousands of people working at the site on grade, below grade. Then you had more thousands surrounding the site. The site's alive, it's still burning, smoke billowing. And yet she took that picture. We both walked across the debris field. She stopped and took a picture of me, and no one's there except for me. I mean, that tells you how big it was. I mean, if you could have that many people working in that big a disaster, and I'm the only person in a picture that encompasses 5 acres or so, it was an incredible, almost unbelievable sight to see.
Isn't it amazing that you're like the only person out in the middle of all that? I mean, isn't it?
We walked across the field. See the crane black? So that's where you're walking across the debris field. There's like no one there. And the back's all still smoldering in the back. And then you just came in front of me and took that picture with all that in the background. I look at that picture, I still get, you know, feelings from it. This was like building 4. And another thing about that building there was that, I don't know what day it was, but and we had done a body recovery to the right of where that spare was. And standing there, we had this body in a body bag. And all of a sudden, there's like an interior collapse in this building. The building wasn't coming down, I'm quite sure of that, but anyway, they sound that evacuation signal, and everybody's running down the street again, and there you are, like running down the street, you know, with a dead body in your hands, and we didn't even talk about that for like 3 months, I bet, because it was like an everyday thing. You know, maybe in wartime, you expect to run down the street with a body in your hand or something like that, but not in New York City. And anyway.
Are you doing good?
Well, you know what? I don't want to get too deep into that because I also have a problem justifying any negative feelings I have when other people have gone through this, you know, the Pentagon, Pennsylvania. I don't know. So I think there are some issues, but in that scale, it's not that big a deal. I think understanding stress is an important thing for not only our troops at home, but also for the responders that came here, not just people like me for 8 days, but a lot of people worked a long time in there digging out. And that's, you know, people don't realize it, you know, all injuries aren't visible.
At Ground Zero, nobody talked about what troubles they were having because, I mean, how could you, you know? You were working with people who were looking for their sons and best friends and fathers, and you just figured nobody could have it worse than them.
You know, I went through a phase of withdrawing from things. I don't know for what reasons. I don't know if it's related or not. Almost like everything that I was involved with back then, I'm not anymore. And so, like, including my marriage and the task force, essentially, everything that I was involved with that period, I'm done with. So the answer is yes, I'm doing okay, but are there issues? Yes. Are they related to this? I don't know. I don't think anybody left there not being changed. And if they say they aren't, they're probably not being honest about it.
You know, some people made drastic changes in their lives. Others, it was more subtle. For me, you know, I pushed all of my physical boundaries. Health-wise, I pushed them. And on an emotional level, I learned about, I guess, a place of sorrow. I learned a depth of sorrow that I hadn't known before. And hope to never know again. I don't want to talk anymore because I might start crying. I gotta stop.
Some of the memories are really hard, but I went on this journey to hear people's stories, whatever they were, and I'm thankful that I did. Everyone's memories are different, but the experience of 9/11 is something that we all share.
Nice.
You hear him say, don't lean on the fence?
When I meet a new person, you know, when they first find out that I was a New York City fireman and that I was a fireman on September 11th, they want to know my story, but more importantly, they want to tell me theirs. And I always found that sometimes I was uncomfortable, you know, because I didn't want to be reminded of it, because I guess it was still so painful. But that's the connection we all have. You know, we're all Americans, and we all went through September 11th. You know, some obviously a lot more than others, but that's their connection, you know, and they get to tell me their story. Now today they get to hear a little bit of mine.
In some way, everyone I photographed at Ground Zero has become a part of me. And Ground Zero has become a part of all of us. You can never forget it, and you can't put it behind you, but you can live with it. And meeting everyone again 10 years later, I've learned that they're all managing to live with it in their own way.
I was haunted with nightmares for the first couple of weeks after I came home. I would wake up with night sweats. I would wake up screaming. And my wife and family were very concerned, but ultimately they went away. When you're working, you're focused on what you have to do. So I guess it was a chance for us to be like everybody else. When they finally said on that bus, you're not going back here tomorrow, you're going home. Was it sad? Absolutely. Absolutely. I can remember being on the bus going back, and there wasn't a dry eye on the bus. We're all grown men and nobody wanted to show their emotion. So it was the toughest bus ride in a school bus that I ever had. I often wonder about that woman that we found that was all in one piece and covered in dust. What was her name? I never found out. There was no way to find out. Who did she belong to? What kind of family did she have? How thankful must they have been that they actually got somebody back that they could have held a wake and funeral for, where other families got absolutely nothing back to this day. So there's reminders of it in my life every day, and I hope there is, seeing the pictures. They don't stir up bad memories. They just stir up the fact that I happen to be involved in something that was that big. I mean, there isn't a firefighter in this country who, at the time of that thing happening, didn't want to be there to help. And it proves that I was there trying to help.
Was it weird when I called you?
Oh my God, it's like, I cannot believe it. 10 years later, it's like, I wonder where you've been, what you've done. What would I ever been able to get in touch with you again and kind of talk about some of the stuff, because you were there. History needs to be told, needs to be discussed, but I think I just didn't have the way to be able to tell the story. Andrea, a person whom I trusted, and I felt was very honest and sincere on what she was doing down at Ground Zero when we met, and the contribution that she made to document what happened down there. I felt that this was an opportunity for me to come and tell the story as it was. Frankly, I think that I will go back home and I will look at those pictures. And I will sit down with my family, and I will explain to them what happened. I'll explain and I'll tell them the story.
For the New York Fire Department, getting past 9/11 is probably impossible. They lost 343 members that day. And visiting Chief Kilduff in his office, it was like being in a 9/11 museum. I look around and it's like, 9/11 was 10 years ago, but do you still think about 9/11 every day?
I mean, as a department, for us, we basically dedicated everything we do to the events and to the firefighters that were killed on September 11th. September 11th is not just about September 11th and the months afterwards. It's about the years after, and it's what you learn during those years after. It basically threads its way through the department. A lot of what the department does is based on caring for the families and caring for the legacy of September 11th and the firefighters that were killed. I worry that people forget. I think in New York City, people don't forget because we always have this terrorism element that's around. But from a national perspective, from a global perspective, I think people tend to, I don't think they forget, I think it just fades.
I don't think about 9/11 every day. I don't talk about it every day. I don't talk about it every week. It doesn't mean that I didn't love Neil and I don't miss him. 9/11 to me isn't just a terrorist attack or, building collapse. It is the day that my stepfather died. And I think that the biggest tribute to him is not sitting around sulking. It's, he bought me my first camera. On 9/11, I think it's a lot more meaningful and a lot better of a tribute to go out and take some great photos and enjoy the world.
I think from all the people that I met at Ground Zero, Tom Prin had the most painful memories. And so I think for him, it wasn't so much a matter of moving on, but more how to live with the memories that he had.
In 2005, I fell through a fire escape in Brooklyn, and I fractured my vertebrae. I had 3 back surgeries then, and I had to retire from the New York City Fire Department. And now I teach tactical medicine to the military. My son just turned 3, and we just found out we're pregnant on Tuesday. So, yeah, you guys are the first to be hearing this. My father's just finding out right now for the first time. And, yeah, Dad, you're gonna be a grandpa again.
Put more footprints on your own.
Yeah. I was trying to hold out, but holy cow. My life is very good today.
You can't forget, but you have to move on. You can't stay there and be, because then what are you gonna do? You're gonna become some depressed human being, and then you can't move forward. You gotta move on. You never forget the people that were there and how hard they worked. You never forget the people that were sitting in their office and working just like I do every day in my job to pay the bills. And you don't forget the families, but you can't think about body parts and debris and the stuff, because then what are you gonna do? You're gonna cry and you're gonna be all hate, because it makes you think about hate. So if you sit down, you think about that, I say it's not my job. My job is to get up, build.
Where are you working?
Well, actually, I'm still in the World Trade Center area. So yeah, I'm still there.
Wow.
I'm still there every day.
So you've seen all the changes.
Yeah, oh, a lot of changes. You see everybody going to work like nothing happened. They feel secure. You can see the security again on everybody. And you see no one is afraid anymore of coming there. They come even more. We have so much tourists, it's ridiculous.
Is it nice to see trees and the buildings going up and the change?
I wish the 2 buildings were there. But, you know, it's the city. You just wake up. It's like a slap, you know? It's like it happened, we have to move on.
Ramona's right. I've covered disasters for over 20 years, and there's definitely a difference in covering a man-made disaster versus a natural disaster. But I guess with everything, eventually things come back. After a hurricane, you know, leaves will come back on the trees, the floodwaters recede, fires are eventually put out. And in walking around with Richie, it occurred to me that even Ground Zero was going to come back.
So it's really good to see. I think it's going to be a good-looking building, but it's good to see that the site's coming back. I think it shows the resilience of New York City, right? Yeah. And in the country. And this is what 4 was right there, and they're already building up. Wow. I don't know what's going to happen on the other site. I guess the memorial's going there somewhere, right? And it's taken a while, but the building's going up. The area where building number 4 was, there's another building there, and you know, it's like, you know, when we were there, it was disaster. It was like the biggest disaster I've ever seen or in the United States. I think the first thing that opened my eyes was like the trees in the middle of the site. You know, I don't know if they're just temporary or not, but I'm gonna have to look at all the pictures again because, you know, I have some that I can vividly, I can describe them to you right now, and others that, you know, that I haven't seen in a while. I'm gonna look back at this in hindsight and say, that was good for me to come.
For me, it was really important to be there with him. It was important to see the site, see the trees, you know, see that it was becoming something else.
Great to see you. Okay, bye.
I'm not sure if this journey has brought me closure with Ground Zero, but reconnecting with all these friends has brought me a kind of peace. And I feel like now I can close the Green Book.